Okay, let's bring in Judith Sloan, because it's interest rates and the economy that's everywhere at the same time as we're looking at national security issues. In 2023, we've got rates rising, we've got inflation spiking, we've got all those energy costs. And I tell you, forget the voice and everything else. If you sit around the table with Australians at the moment, they are worried how they're going to pay their bills and get through the year. Joining me now, economist and columnist at the Australian, Judith Sloan. You wrote very powerfully today that every treasurer tries to make their mark on the portfolio, but beyond his essay, that didn't go down too well, a lot of talk, but not a lot of great strategy from Jim Chalmers. Where should his focus be, Judith Sloan?
Well, hello, Peter. Yes. He did actually write a piece in the Australian last week, which, on the face of it looked kind of fairly reasonable. It said, cost of living pressures, supply issues, budget policy, but there's no detail. And really, I think they're running for cover. And I think, your viewers will have noticed that every time he mentions the Reserve Bank, he calls it the Independent Reserve Bank, And really, I think the message there is, well, don't blame me, it's the Independent Reserve Bank. But I think, as all economists know, budget policy and monetary policy are like two gloves, left and right. And so what's happening with monetary policy is very much influenced by what's happening with budget policy. And there, I think Jim, I think he understands that, but he wants to kind of obfuscate.
Well, we know that the Reserve Bank Governor will front estimates tomorrow. We also know right now the Treasurer is sitting in his ERC, or budget preparation meetings. He's under pressure from backbenchers who are worried about cost of living in their seats, and that'll hurt them at the next election, given all the promises that Albanese made prior to the election. So there's that tension between, all of us told not to spend, but a government under pressure to spend our taxes with more handouts. Who's going to win?
Well, he's using this sneaky device of these off-budget funds, which really, to my mind, are an absolute disgrace. So he's got one for social housing, which is in dispute with the Greens at the moment as we speak. He's got one for the transmission, the Wiring the Nation, I think it's called. He's got one which I think is particularly dubious, which is the National Reconstruction Fund, which looks like just handouts for sort of unionised workers in manufacturing. And that also. Now, the opposition, I think, is quite right to oppose these, because I think they're not well thought out. But here's the really important point. They amount to about $45 billion, right? And so, in effect, what Jim is seemingly doing is that he wants to say, I'm restricting growth of spending on the budget. But he's at the same time allowing $45 billion, basically all borrowed, I might add, of new funds to be established, which add to demand in exactly the same way, and are inflationary in exactly the same way as other government spending is.
It is tricky, and you're right to call out. It's been a growth industry, these off-budget funds, probably for the last 15 to 20 years, but they were on steroids in the Rudd and Gillard era, and they've come back hard again, although I do say the coalition with its NBN off-budget fund is no better. Let's get to household issues. This mortgage payment. The headlines in the Age newspaper this morning are a shocker. Fixed mortgage rates, they say, will tip people over a $16,000 cliff. This is analysis from KPMG that says anyone on an average mortgage of around $600,000, which is not a big mortgage if you're in a capital city. If you come off fixed rates that was set when they were nice and low to pick up what's available now, you'll cop $16,000 plus in your interest increases this year. And now, how on earth does an average Australian pay for that?
Well, I think with a great deal of difficulty. And I think, I'm not sure I'm that critical of what Phil Lowe is doing at the moment. If it wasn't Phil Lowe, it was another governor, they'd be doing what he's doing now, which is, I think, sadly, ratcheting up the cash rate to try and rein in inflation. Where he made the mistake, and indeed other members of the bank made a mistake, was in their reaction to the pandemic, which was to push interest rates way too low, to engage in this what we call quantitative easing, bond buying exercise, but then telling everyone that the interest rates were going to stay low till 2024. Now, that was highly misleading. And so a lot of people, I think, must feel very bitter about that, because if you thought the interest rates, they were so low. Don't forget how low they were. You could get a mortgage rate under 2 if you're lucky, but certainly around 2. And now you've faced the prospect of 6 or even higher. I think, we are going to see some fallout. And that's the problem for the government, is that they know for sure that the economy is going to slow. Is it going to hang in sufficiently so unemployment doesn't rise too much and, heaven forbid, go into a recession? But Peter, you made a really important point. There is a degree of hypocrisy at the moment of the government in that this budget is being incredibly favoured by our high commodity prices. And here we are, coal, gas, iron ore. Is this a government who really wants to support those industries? No. So, it seems to me that they're happy to accept the additional revenue. I might add through agriculture a little bit as well. And yet they are, in fact, very hostile to, I think, further investment in those industries.
You're not wrong, Judith Sloan. We'll watch it closely. Thank you.